On a biting winter morning in the year 1150, a dense frost clings to the Romanesque stone arches of a massive abbey in the rolling hills of Burgundy, France. The valleys are silent, wrapped in a blanket of fog, but inside the heavy oak gates of the monastery, a domestic civilization has been awake for hours. This is the Abbey of Saint-Germain, a Benedictine community where every breath, every step, and every word is governed by the Rule of Saint Benedict, a 6th century code of conduct that turns daily life into a continuous prayer. While the surrounding medieval world is fractured by feudal wars, famine, and the law of the sword, inside these walls lies a sanctuary of absolute order, peace, and preservation. Here, a community of monks lives out a silent routine of prayer, manual labor, and study, oblivious to the wider storms of history. This reconstruction of daily life inside a Benedictine monastery in the year 1150 has been created with artificial intelligence based on monastic cartularies, architectural remains, and historical records of the high medieval period. If you enjoy seeing the lost worlds of our past reborn in images like this, subscribe to the channel The History Forge and leave a like so we can continue bringing these vanished spaces back into the light. To understand the architecture of this sacred compound, one must look at the layout of the monastic cloister, which is designed as a physical representation of the heavenly Jerusalem. The cloister is a square, arcaded walkway situated on the sunny south side of the massive stone abbey church. The arches are carved from local limestone, supported by twin columns with capitals depicting biblical scenes, foliage, and mythical beasts. The walkway encloses a central open-topped garth, featuring a small lawn and a stone basin, the lavabo, fed by an underground aqueduct, where the monks wash their hands before meals. The cloister is the physical heart of the community, connecting all the main buildings. The church to the north, the refectory where they eat to the south, the dormitory where they sleep to the east, and the cellarers' storehouses to the west. The floors of these passages are paved with cold, gray flagstones, worn smooth by generations of sandaled feet. The community living inside these stone walls is a structured monastic family, mirroring the feudal order outside but bound by vows of stability, conversion of life, and obedience. At the head of this hierarchy stands the abbot, chosen by the monks and confirmed by the bishop. He holds absolute spiritual and administrative authority, representing Christ within the walls, yet he is cautioned by the rule to govern with moderation and consult the elder brothers on important matters. Below him stands the prior, who manages the daily discipline of the house, and the cellarer, who oversees the vast economic estates of the abbey, including the farms, vineyards, mills, and woodlands that provide the monastery's income. The monks themselves are divided into two distinct groups: the choir monks, who are literate, ordained priests dedicated to the liturgy and study, and the lay brothers or conversi, who are often illiterate men from the peasant class responsible for the heavy agricultural work of the abbey. The journey to becoming a monk is a rigorous trial of resolve, designed to weed out those who seek the cloister for convenience rather than conviction. When a young postulant first arrives at the abbey gates, he is not welcomed inside. Instead, he must knock repeatedly for 4 or 5 days, ignored or even rebuffed by the porter, to test his humility and patience. If he persists, he is admitted to the guest house before being brought to the novitiate, a separate wing of the monastery where he is placed under the strict supervision of the novice master. For a full year, the novice is taught the Latin prayers, the chants of the liturgy, and the detailed regulations of the rule. He performs the most menial tasks, cleaning the stables, carrying firewood, and scrubbing the latrines, while being watched constantly for signs of pride or rebellion. Only after this year of testing, and with the approval of the community, is he permitted to make his final vows, lying prostrate on the stone floor of the church as the monks chant over him, signifying his death to the secular world and his rebirth in the spirit. The daily schedule of the monastery is an uncompromising cycle of prayer known as the Opus Dei, the work of God, which divides the day and night into 8 canonical hours. In the pitch darkness of 2 o'clock in the morning, the heavy bell in the church tower rings for vigils, also called matins. The monks rise silently from their straw mattresses in the cold, unheated dormitory, wrapping their heavy woolen hoods around their faces, and walk down the stone night stairs directly into the dark choir of the Abbey church. Lit only by a few beeswax candles, they stand in wooden stalls, chanting the psalms in Latin from memory, their breath rising like incense in the freezing air. After matins comes lauds at dawn, followed by prime at 6 o'clock, terce at 9, sext at midday, none at 3 in the afternoon, vespers at sunset, and compline before sleep. This constant rhythm of prayer ensures that no monk is ever more than a few hours away from the altar. The humiliation of the individual and the elevation of the community are reinforced by the strict rule of silence that pervades the monastery. Monks are forbidden from speaking without permission, particularly during the night hours and at meals. To communicate during silent periods, they use a highly developed language of hand signs, perfected over centuries. A monk wishing to ask for bread makes a circle with his fingers. For fish, he mimics the movement of a tail. For water, he cups his hand and brings it to his lips. This silent code allows the work of the abbey to continue without interruption, turning the kitchens, the scriptorium, and the cloister into spaces of quiet contemplation, where the only sounds are the rustle of woolen habits and the scraping of wooden clogs on the stone floors. Every morning, after the prayers of prime, the community gathers in the chapter house, a spacious hall lined with stone benches that serves as the administrative court of the monastery. The meeting begins with the reading of a chapter from the Rule of Saint Benedict, followed by the commemoration of the saints and deceased brothers of the day. Then comes the chapter of faults, a psychological ritual of public confession and correction that reinforces the absolute discipline of the house. One by one, monks stand before the abbot to confess their minor infractions of the rule, dropping a wooden bowl in the kitchen, whispering in the cloister, or nodding off during the long chants of vigils. If a monk remains silent, his brothers are required by their vows to accuse him of any faults they have observed. The abbot assigns penances, which may include repeating psalms, performing extra manual labor, or sitting at the lowest place in the refectory. For severe offenses, such as harboring private property or showing insolence to the prior, a monk can be formally excommunicated from the table and the chapel, isolated from his brothers until he shows true repentance. The food served in the refectory is simple, designed for sustenance rather than pleasure, and is eaten in absolute silence. The monks sit on wooden benches along the walls, their heads bowed, while one of the brothers reads passages from the scriptures or the writings of the church fathers from a raised stone pulpit. The rule forbids the consumption of the meat of four-legged animals, so the diet consists of coarse whole wheat bread, pottage, a thick vegetable stew made of cabbage, leeks, onions and beans grown in the abbey garden, cheese and eggs. The meal is accompanied by a measured portion of ale or watered wine, the hemina, which is the daily allowance permitted to each monk to support his health. If a monk requires more food due to hard labor, the abbot may grant an extra portion, but gluttony is considered a serious sin, punished by public penance in the chapter house. The work of the monastery is divided between the physical labor of the fields and the intellectual labor of the scriptorium. In the scriptorium, the copying of texts is not merely a task of preservation, but a sacred duty that is considered a form of manual labor equal to plowing the fields. The production of a single Bible can take a team of scribes several years, requiring dozens of sheep or calves to be slaughtered to produce the high-quality vellum sheets. The scribes work in absolute silence, sitting at slanted desks designed to catch the natural light from the windows. To create the beautiful illuminated capital letters and borders, they use rare and expensive pigments brought from the corners of the medieval world. Lapis lazuli ground into a brilliant blue from the mountains of Afghanistan, malachite for green, cinnabar for red, and thin leaves of beaten gold applied over gesso to catch the light. The library, or armarium, contains only a few dozen volumes, yet each book is a treasure of immense value, often chained to the shelves to prevent theft. Scribes write curses in the colophons of the books, warning that anyone who steals the volume will be cursed with excommunication and physical torments. Meanwhile, the lay brothers and peasant laborers manage the vast agricultural estates that make the abbey self-sufficient. In the fields surrounding the walls, they guide wooden plows pulled by oxen, sowing wheat, rye, and barley. The abbey's vineyards are particularly important, producing wine not only for the sacrament of the altar, but also for sale to local merchants. Monks are pioneer agriculturalists, introducing advanced crop rotation systems, breeding sheep for wool, and constructing watermills along the streams to grind grain and full cloth. The abbey is also home to a complex of workshops, a blacksmith's forge, a bakery, a cooperage, and a tannery, ensuring that every tool, shoe, and barrel needed by the community is produced within the walls, minimizing contact with the corrupting influence of the secular world. In the dark, vaulted cellars of the abbey, the cellarer and his assistants keep watch over the economic lifeline of the monastery. These storerooms are filled with giant oak casks of wine, salted pork in wooden barrels, rounds of hard cheese, and bins of dried grain tithed by the peasants of the surrounding estates. The abbey acts as a major landowner in the region, collecting rents and tithes from the local villages in exchange for spiritual protection and access to the abbey's watermills. This wealth, however, is a source of constant tension. Local barons often look upon the monastery's tax-free lands with jealousy, leading to disputes over boundaries and fishing rights. The cellarer must be both a shrewd merchant and a faithful monk, bargaining with merchants at local fairs for the price of wool, while ensuring that the monastery's storehouses are always prepared to feed the community and the poor through years of winter shortage. The clothing of a Benedictine monk is a visual symbol of his vow of poverty and renunciation of the world. Upon entering the novitiate, the novice surrenders his secular clothes and is issued the habit. This consists of a long, loose tunic of undyed wool, usually gray or brown, a scapular, which is a wide band of cloth worn over the shoulders, and a cowl, a wide-sleeved outer garment with a large hood. The head is shaved in the tonsure, a circular ring of hair that represents the crown of thorns worn by Christ, leaving the ears and face exposed as a sign of humility. The monk owns nothing of his own. His habit, his writing tablet, his needle, and his sandals are the property of the monastery, checked regularly by the prior to ensure that no brother is hoarding private possessions. The monastery also serves as a center of charity, healing, and hospitality for the surrounding region. The guest house, or hospitium, is located near the main gate, where the porter welcomes travelers, pilgrims, and the poor. The rule dictates that all guests must be received as if they were Christ himself, and the abbot or prior washes the feet of the arrivals, offering them shelter and a share of the abbey's food. In the herb garden, or herbularius, the infirmary cultivates medicinal plants, sage, mint, fennel, and rue, used to treat the sick in the monastic infirmary. The infirmary is a separate ward where the sick and elderly monks are cared for, allowed the luxury of meat and fires to support their recovery. When a monk reaches the end of his earthly life, the final ritual of his stability is enacted in the presence of the entire community. As he draws his last breath on a bed of straw in the infirmary, the sacristan tolls the passing bell in a slow, rhythmic pattern, announcing to the valley that a soul is departing. The brothers gather to wash the body, dressing it in a clean habit and cowl. The deceased is then carried to the choir of the abbey church, where a continuous vigil is kept. Monks take turns standing by the body day and night, chanting the office of the dead in low, solemn tones. At the funeral, the monk is carried to the cemetery behind the church, or sometimes directly into the cloister garth. He is buried without a coffin, laid directly into the dark soil, wrapped only in his woolen habit, with a simple wooden cross to mark the grave. The abbot sprinkles the earth with holy water, reminding the brothers that they too are but dust, and that their only hope is the resurrection promised at the end of days. As the sun sets over the Burgundy hills, the bells ring for vespers, calling the monks to the church for the evening prayers. The service is filled with the chanting of the Magnificat, their voices echoing off the stone vaulting of the roof. After vespers, the monks return to the refectory for a light supper of bread and water, followed by the reading of the collations, the stories of the Desert Fathers. By 8 o'clock, after the final prayers of Compline, the monks return to the dormitory. They sleep in their habits, including their belts and shoes, so they can rise instantly when the bell rings for matins in the dark hours of the night. The dormitory is silent, lit only by a single lamp that burns until dawn, symbolizing the constant watchfulness of the soul. The year 1150 was a period of transition and debate within the monastic world of France. The Benedictine order, centered on the magnificent Abbey of Cluny, was facing criticism for its wealth, luxury, and political influence. In response, a strict reform movement led by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux had established the Cistercian order, advocating for a return to literal poverty, manual labor, and simple stone architecture without decoration. The Abbey of Saint-Germain, while remaining Benedictine, felt the pressure of these reforms, leading to a tightening of discipline and a reduction in the use of expensive liturgical vessels and colorful wall paintings. At the same time, the rise of cathedral schools in cities like Paris was beginning to challenge the monasteries as the primary centers of education and intellectual life in Europe. The stone walls of the Abbey of Saint-Germain have survived the rise and fall of empires, the wars of religion, and the secularization of the French Revolution, which saw many monasteries closed and sold for stone. Today, the cloister stands silent, the Romanesque columns reflecting the afternoon sun, while the gardens are filled with grass instead of medicinal herbs. Yet, the flagstones of the cloisters still bear the faint, smooth depressions worn by the sandaled feet of the monks who once walked their rounds in silence, praying for the salvation of a world they had renounced. Each time these silent spaces are walked again, the domestic civilization of the medieval monks returns to the light, a reminder of an age when men sought the quiet of the cloister to find the peace of the soul in a world of violence and change.